Some years back, my family and I, we lived in Virginia, and our children were smaller. And we had these 2 guinea pigs, and we loved them. They were just part of the family. And we had them in a small crate, and we fed them and cleaned up, and just beautiful guinea pigs with a small house in there. Well, it happened that one of them died. Well, what do you do when a guinea pig dies? You come together as family, and we dug a hole in the flower bed, and we buried the guinea pig with a makeshift cross made from small twigs, and we hugged each other, and I teared up, and I was sad, So you may wonder, what's going on? Is that a little bit too much for a grown man to tear up when a guinea pig dies? And you may be right, maybe a little bit much. But what I discovered during that time, is there were more than the loss of a guinea pig. There was more sadness in me that I had kind of kept to me and had not dealt with. So over losing the guinea pig, I kind of felt sad. Now, I deeply believe there are losses, each and every one of us experiences, that are important to grieve. So when you think of your life and right now until now, are there losses? What are losses that you would be still good for you to grieve, to let go, to go into, and let the healing power of the Spirit move through you, in and through that sadness and in and through that loss? From my experience, one of the greatest gifts we can give someone else is to be with them in their sadness, in their loss, without judgment and without trying to fix it. One of the greatest gifts we can give each other is just be with one another, caring, listening, loving, hugging, just being present, without judgment, without trying to fix it. That's the deep compassion, the deep empathy that we have. And I think that's what we're invited in to move toward when we listen to Paul, the scripture, and later on to Jesus too. Going to Paul, Paul was an amazing person. He had this out-of-body experience. He was like, wow. He describes it as he was elevated to the 3rd heaven, to this level, left his body, is experiencing the glory of God, something not even pot can give you. He was Did I just say that? Way beyond that. Okay, that's a conversation for afterwards. Can you cut that out of the recording? And then Paul is hitting rock bottom. He's coming out, and he's down, and he is struggling with something he describes as a thorn, a messenger of Satan. You talking about wrestling with something in his body, in his spirit, in his soul. We do not know exactly what, and all the interpreters of Scripture try to find out. What was it? Was it epilepsy? Was it we unfortunately do not know what Paul was struggling with and suffering with. But he's wrestling with it, and he's praying, God, take this from me. It's not going away. Still struggling. He's praying again, help me. It's more than I can do on my own. God, take this from me. Still not going away. He's wrestling with, praying over and over. And he realizes that this is not going to go away. God will not take it away. So what I really need is God's help to deal with it. God's help and grace and healing in it as I wrestle and struggle with it. So, it's not a pretty situation to be in that, is it? I like how the Message translation of the New Testament puts it, the first Beatitudes. We know it by blessed are those who are poor in spirit. Eugene Peterson puts it like this: you are blessed when you're at the end of the rope, for where there is less of you, there is more of God. Is it pretty to be at the end of the rope? My gosh, it's not. It's not. But then letting go and realizing it's less of me to make more room of God. And when are we ready to do that? Well, sometimes when we hit bottom, sometimes when we deal with situations we cannot change, sometimes when we wrestle and things are out of our control. And aren't there many of those situations that are out of our control? So the things that do not go away, how do we deal with them? Susan Cain wrote a new book, and it's called Bittersweet: How Our Longing and Brokenness Makes Us Whole. And she describes those places in our lives where we feel like it's too much, where we're overwhelmed, where there is a sadness, where we may feel swept away. It's coming like waves. You know, you go into the ocean, you're at the beach, and you go in, and sometimes the wave comes and it's sweeping you away. It's kind of, you're swept away, and it takes a little bit to find your grounding again. That's sometimes how grief comes and goes. And to live with it and go with it, that's how we can deal with it. And there is this beautiful story of Rumi. You know, each and every one of you knows Rumi. I think, if not one of the greatest poet ever on our planet. From where did his poetry come? Rumi had a best friend called Shams. They were one heart and soul. One heart and soul. Overnight, Shams disappeared. People think he was taken away, he was killed, he was murdered. Never ever did Rumi meet Shams again. Broken heart. Out of that brokenness, out of that grief, out of that, the beauty of Rumi's poetry grows. Bitter and sweet. Out of the darkness, out of the pain, something can come. And Jesus says in John, a kernel of wheat needs to be buried, needs to be planted and die in the ground for it to grow. Well, sometimes we want it to grow without having to plant it, without it having to die. It does not. So sometimes we're invited and urged and called to go into that sadness and to live through it and with it and help it, let it inform us. So what in you has to die to make room for new life? What is it that you are to let go, to be receptive for God's goodness? You know, years ago, that guinea pig died, and I recognized there was more sadness in me than just the loss of the guinea pig. I found a counselor who helped me work through that grief, and it was very good that I did it. A friend can do that too. So to whom are you a friend?